Alrighty, good morning. Looks like we're going to start here our webinar. For those of you who perhaps don't know me or haven't received an email from me, my name is Lynette Carrillo, and I am a business development representative here at eCore. I'll be hosting today's webinar, which is going to talk about how to plan in practice your Atlassian cloud migration. And with me, I also have Allison Carlson, who will be conducting our Q&A portion. Now, the actual webinar itself is pre-recorded. Peter, unfortunately, had prior engagements, but was gracious enough to pre-record the webinar for us. So like I mentioned, the webinar is pre-recorded. We will conduct a Q&A at the end, and I'll let Allison kind of do a little introduction about herself.
Thank you, Lynette. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Carlson. As Lynette indicated, I am a certified Atlassian consultant with eCore, and I participate in helping do migration plans and also work in a pre-sales capacity working with our clients in order to create proposals for them. So with that, let me turn it back over to Lynette.
Thank you, Allison. So just a brief little background of eCore. We are a trusted technology partner that works with customers to unlock the value of technology investments. We offer consulting and software development services to improve agility and speed to market with innovative solutions. I strongly encourage you to visit our website to learn more about what we can do for you and your business. I do ask that if you have any questions to refrain from raising your hand, and please type it into the Q&A portion and it will be answered at the end. And I believe we can go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We here at eCore hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, of course, depending on where you're watching us from. We also are very excited about having you here today, and thank you so much for joining us in this webinar on how you and your company can better plan and execute your Atlassian cloud migration. Now, today we're going to be covering the topics, and the main topics, that you should keep in mind whenever you're planning and executing your migration. And towards the end of this presentation, we're going to have a quick hands-on demonstration of essentially what a Jira migration looks like when you're moving from a server environment to a cloud environment. All right. We're also going to have a quick Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. So please keep note of any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. But first, let me just do a quick introduction. My name is Peter Vergado. I'm a certified Atlassian consultant here at eCore with experience in many Atlassian implementation, improvements, as well as migration projects that I've had throughout the years. Now, before we even talk about migrating over to cloud, you might even be wondering, why go through the effort of migrating to cloud in the first place? Why not just stay in server or data center? And there are quite a few reasons why, actually. The first one, of course, and the most obvious one is you will no longer need to worry about maintaining a structure in order to keep Jira running. So no longer you need to maintain servers. You won't have to worry about the costs associated with maintaining those servers. You won't need to worry about maintaining databases to run Jira or Confluence or any other Atlassian applications. You will no longer need to worry about holding all of the efforts necessary to update your applications to its latest version so you can continue to enjoy its latest features and ensuring that security patches are applied and things like that. Besides that, of course, there's more reliability and compliance with cloud. And then, of course, the other reason is all of that is going to be managed by Atlassian. All of that is going to be handled by Atlassian. And with the fact that Atlassian today is a cloud-first solution or cloud-first company, it means that you will have more frequent updates by Atlassian, because as of now and towards the future, of course, Atlassian is going to be mostly focused on its cloud solutions. So that essentially means that any new features, any updates, any security patches that are going to be applied to a cloud solutions are always going to come to cloud first. So you'll be the first in line to receive those updates and to receive those new features. With cloud, also Atlassian can provide a better support, and overall, just the whole user experience is a lot more seamless and a lot more user friendly. It's easier for you to configure integrations between different Atlassian solutions as well as other solutions. You have a larger variety of plugins also available to you when you're in cloud, because not only is Atlassian cloud first today, but also all of its third-party solutions are moving towards a cloud-first approach as well. So overall, going to cloud is just going to be a better experience for you and your company. It's going to be easier to maintain. It's going to be easier to set up and start using. So, there are quite a few reasons why you'd want to move to cloud. Okay, so with all of that being said, chances are if you're here today, it probably means that you and your company already made the choice that you want to migrate to cloud. So what is the next step? Well, now is the moment that you need to assess your instance. Now, what this means, of course, is you need to understand all of the nooks and crannies of your organization's instance and essentially identify the scope of your migration and how ready your server instance is for that migration. So essentially what this means is, let's say, for example, you're migrating Jira to cloud. You need to get in there and you need to understand how many projects will be migrated. Are you moving all of the projects in your instance? Are you only moving a set of projects that are going to be determined? And of course, out of all those projects, how many issues are going to be migrated? How many fields do you need to migrate? How many workflows and issue types? What are the configuration changes and what are the specific settings that were applied to your instance that might make this migration unique? You need to consider all of those whenever you're thinking about migrating. Besides that, you also need to consider how many users and groups are going to be migrated and how are those users and groups managed? Are they managed within Jira or are they managed by an external user management system such as an LDAP, Microsoft Active Directory, or something similar like that? Besides that, you also need to consider apps, and this is actually very important because apps bring in a lot of different functionalities and a lot of new features to Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, and so on. And depending on the apps, some of those might or might not be available in cloud. So you need to consider in those cases if those apps are truly necessary, if you can part with them, or if not, are there any alternatives to those apps? If the answer to those are essentially no, like if you cannot part with those apps, but there aren't any good alternatives in cloud, then maybe you might need to reassess whether a migration to cloud is indeed the best option for you. However, if you do believe that you can part with those apps, or maybe there are good alternatives, then you can proceed with the migration accordingly, of course. Besides that, you also need to think whether the server and cloud instances are ready for migration. For example, in your server instance, while the migration is running, there are a lot of processes that are going to be running on the back end. So you need to make sure that the server can handle those processes. For example, you need at least 4 gigabytes available in your for your Jira instance in server, at the very least, of course. I mean, depending on the size of the instance, you might need more memory allocation, but generally for like a small to medium size, at the like 4 gigabytes of memory are the very least that you're going to need. So in those cases, you need to make sure that you have that memory allocation available, so you don't have like an out of memory exception that could just completely destroy your migration mid process. So, and besides that, of course, you need to make sure that you have a cloud instance to receive that migration, uh, to receive that data. So, you need to make sure that all of those things are ready to go before your migration. Now, once your assessment is done, the next step, of course, is going to be to define a migration strategy or a migration method that you're going to be employing whenever you're moving your data into cloud. And you have a couple of options there. At least two main migration methods are available to you. The first one, of course, is the site import, and the other one is by using a cloud migration assistant. Now, historically, at least, site imports were the way that you would be able to migrate data, at least before cloud migration assistants came to be. Site imports essentially come down to extracting a backup from your server instance, preparing that backup, of course, to make sure that it's ready to be uploaded in the cloud, and then finally, of course, uploading it into your cloud instance using the restore option. Now, of course, this is a much more involved method of migrating your data. Of course, it means that you need to extract the backup, and once that backup is ready, it's going to be saved into the server wherever your application is installed. So you need to reach into that server, extract those files from over there. And then there's a little bit of preparation that needs to be applied to those files to make sure that they are ready to be uploaded into your cloud instance. And then, of course, whenever you perform a restore in cloud, which is the option that you have to upload those backups into your cloud instance, it means that any existing data that was already in your cloud instance is going to be deleted and replaced with whatever is coming from the backup. So it's something to keep in mind. Site imports are only recommended if you're moving into a fresh new site in Jira Cloud or in Confluence Cloud and so on. You should not choose site import if you're migrating into an already existing and an already being used instance of Atlassian Cloud. Right? There are still some scenarios that you might choose site import over cloud migration assistance, though. Say, for example, if you have a lot of advanced roadmaps plans that need to be migrated, advanced roadmaps plans migration is still not quite optimized with cloud migration assistance, at least as of today. They're still in a beta phase. So if you need to migrate advanced roadmaps plans, site import might be the better option, or at the very least, the most reliable option to make sure that all of that data is going to be migrated correctly. With pretty much any other scenario, though, you might probably be better off choosing a cloud migration assistant. And of course, cloud migration assistants, we have a few different options. You have the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant, or what we call the JCMA. You also have CCMA, which is the Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant, as well as BCMA, which is Bitbucket Cloud Migration Assistant. However, all of those work essentially in the same way. They are a plugin that you add to your server application, same way that you're going to add any other plugin from the Atlassian marketplace into your server application, and whenever they're there, they pretty much do most of the job for you. It's essentially just a matter of, clicking on them and, filling out a couple of fields and selecting a couple of options, and it'll pretty much do the job for you. Of course, it's a little more involved than just that, but we're going to show you in the demonstration towards the end of this presentation essentially what that looks like. But like I said, it's going to do most of the job for you. So once you've selected your migration method, the next step, of course, is going to be to run a pre-migration checklist. Now, the pre-migration checklist is essentially just a set of steps that you need to go through to make sure that both your server instance and your cloud instance are ready for the migration itself. You know, Now this is a pretty extensive checklist that Atlassian provides, And you can find that on this link over here. So if you go to Atlassian support page and look for the Jira, Confluence, and Bitbucket pre-migration checklists, you're going to locate the page, this page over here, where you can take a look at all of your pre-migration checklists based on which application you're going to be migrating to cloud. So, like I said, these are pretty extensive checklists, and there are a lot of steps that you need to go through and a lot of checks that you need to run before you begin your migration. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of them in detail, but I do want to go through some of the most important steps that you need to consider. And since in this presentation we're going to be focusing on Jira, I'm going to go ahead and open the Jira pre-migration checklist. So of course, whenever I select that link over there, it takes me to the Jira pre-migration checklist documentation in Atlassian's website. And of course, as you can see, the first step that it tells you is that you need to confirm your migration method. Right? So once again, you have a couple of options. The first one, of course, would be the Jira Cloud site import, which, as we mentioned, for some cases, might be the recommended option. But generally speaking, for most scenarios, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant is going to be the recommended option. Now, depending, of course, on which migration method you choose, you actually have a couple of different migration checklists, pre-migration checklists. So, of course, up here you have the Jira Cloud Migration Checklist, and then you can run on a step-by-step to essentially take a look and make sure that your instances and everything is ready for the migration. And then down here, you also have the Jira Site Import Checklist, which again, you can go through to make sure that everything is ready. And as you can see, there is a lot of detail on each of those steps. So you do have a lot of resources right over here to make sure that everything is set up properly and correctly before your migration. But like I said, I do want to go over some of the most important steps. So the first one, of course, is that you need to create a user migration plan. Now for this, let's consider a scenario that you have a John Doe user, that is active in your Jira server instance. But let's also say that you have a cloud instance already set up and that you already created a few things over there and you're running a production setting on that cloud instance, and John Doe is also active in that cloud site. It means that he created issues and worked on sprints and so on in both instances, right? And you want to make sure that all of the associations, all of the issues that he created, all of the issues that he is assigned to, every data that is associated to his user is going to be migrated correctly. Well, you need to keep in mind the way that user management works in both instances, right? So in Jira Server, you can either, in Server and Data Center, of course, you can either manage your users with Jira's own internal directory, or you can use an external directory, right? Essentially, what that means is, the users are being managed in different places, so it's important that you make sure you know which option is being used for your situation, because it might, if you need to update any data regarding your users, where you're going to update that data is going to change depending on if you're using an external directory or Jira's own internal user directory. But regardless, let's say that, once again, going back to John Doe's example over here, let's say that his email address that is associated to his account, in server, is different than his Atlassian account email address, because every user in cloud needs to have an Atlassian account, and every Atlassian account is associated to an email address. Let's say that by some chance or by whatever reason, John Doe's email address associated to his Atlassian account is different than the email address associated to his Jira Server user account. In that case, you're going to want to go ahead and update his email address in server so that it matches the email address that is associated to his Atlassian account. By doing that, you're going to make sure that all of the data that is coming from Jira is going to be associated to the correct user account in cloud rather than the migration assistant just going ahead and creating a new user. Besides that, you also want to make sure that any inactive users or any users that may not need to be migrated, make sure that those are removed or that they are set as inactive so that they're not going to be migrated and you're not going to be creating excessive users in your cloud site. So, with all of that, you need to create a user migration plan and a strategy for how you're going to be migrating your users. So that's pretty important. Besides that, another point that I want to highlight is that you need to check your Jira Server version. The reason for that is because the Jira Cloud Migration System isn't compatible to every single version of Jira. As a matter of fact, it's only compatible to Jira Server version 7.6.0 or later. So if you're running Jira on an older version than this, you're first going to need to update your server or data center to this version at the very least, to 7.6.0 before you can perform the migration. So that's just something else that, of course, you need to keep in mind. Okay, another thing that I want to make sure that you need to make sure is that you don't have any duplicate email addresses. And this is something that is going to generate an error that won't even allow you to start the migration. Of course, if you're running a migration using a migration assistant. So, make sure that you don't have any duplicate email addresses. Thankfully, it's pretty simple to locate any users that might have a duplicate email address. All you need to do is just select this query over here and run it on your database, and you'll be able to locate any users that might have a duplicate email address. All right. Also, make sure that you have all of the right permissions in both environments before you can start your migration. The next one, the next really important point that I want to highlight is that you need to determine how or even if you will migrate your apps. Now, the reason for this is because Jira Server and Data Center are very different structurally than Jira Cloud, right? What that means is that all of the app manufacturers and app providers, that you have on the Atlassian marketplace, they have to work with different ways whenever they're building an app for server and data center versus whenever they're building an app for cloud. So that means you have a lot of cases, in a lot of scenarios, you have a lot of apps that are available in server and data center, but are not available in cloud. In those cases, you're going to want to go ahead and assess whether that plugin is absolutely necessary. If not, then you can just choose to not migrate it, right? But if it is necessary but is not available in cloud, you might want to go ahead and try to find an alternative solution. So a different plugin that might bring the same functionalities to your Jira Cloud site. And there are also even some cases that a plugin may be available in both server and data center, but not in, or I'm sorry, and also available in cloud, right? But even in those cases, those two iterations of those plugins might work in entirely different ways. Script Runner is actually a perfect example of this because even though it's a plugin that is available for both data center and server as well as cloud instances, the way that the scripts work is entirely different. So if you have scripts that are running on your server instance, you're probably going to have to first translate those into cloud versions to make sure that they continue working properly whenever you migrate over to cloud. And there are also some features from Script Runner that are available in server and data center, such as behaviors, that are not available in cloud. So it's something else that you need to keep in mind. Another example of this is also advanced roadmaps. And even though it is available in both server data center as well as in cloud, and like we mentioned before, there are ways that you can migrate that data over. Advanced roadmaps is only available in Jira Software Cloud Premium. So it's not a standalone app as it was previously in Jira Server and Data Center, but instead you need to have um, Jira Software Cloud Premium if you're going to be migrating that over. So again, something else that you need to keep in mind. Another point that I want to highlight, of course, is that you need to check your public access settings, and this could be regarding a potential security issue. So if you have anything in your server and data center sites that have a permission set to anyone, meaning anyone can view or edit those structures, you're probably going to want to change that to only logged in users, for example so that you don't create a potential security problem in which your data is going to be available for pretty much anyone on the internet that has, the link to said data. So luckily, there are some queries that Atlassian already provided us here in this page. All you need to do is just run these queries on your database, and it's going to identify any items that have permissions set to anyone. And then, of course, if anything comes up, you can just browse over to Jira, change those permissions, and that's pretty much going to make sure that you don't have this potential security problem. And then, of course, we have one query for projects, another one for filters, agile boards, as well as dashboards. So, besides that, of course, you have a lot of other steps that you need to run through in your pre-migration checklist, a lot more technical steps. So, of course, you can feel free to look through these later on as well whenever you're planning your migration. But it's very important that you go through each of those steps, resulting, of course, in a test migration, which is another point that I want to highlight. Always run a task migration into a test environment. That is going to give you the chance to, essentially migrate your data without any compromises that could impact your production. And it'll also give you a chance to test everything out and make sure that everything was migrated correctly, document everything before you run your actual production migration. And of course, depending on the results, you can plan accordingly after that. But when it comes to the pre-migration checklist, that is pretty much it. Once you run the pre-migration checklist, and once you make sure that everything is set up correctly, you're pretty much ready to go ahead and perform the actual migration. Time to finally go on to our hands-on demonstration of a server to cloud migration. All right, so for that, let me jump on over to a Jira Server instance that we have set up over here in order to show you essentially how the cloud migration is going to work. All right, so in this server instance, of course, let's take a look at the projects. I have 3 projects that I want to migrate, projects Hatch, Pickup, and Sedan. Now, all of these projects I want to move over to an instance of cloud that is already set up and running, which is this one. And currently I only have one project over there, which is called Project SUV. All right. But let me take a quick look at the users in this case. As you can see, I'm the only user over here. And I haven't really set up many groups besides from the usual ones, administrators, Jira admins, Jira software users, and site admins as well. So these are the user groups that I have set up. And as you can see, I'm the only user so far, right? And only one project. So let's go ahead and go back into our server instance and set up the whole migration effort. First, I'm actually going to go ahead and show you real quickly how many users we have over here. So as you can see, we have 15 users, a lot of superheroes over here. And of course, they're set up into a couple of user groups, identifying whether they're from DC or Marvel, right? So these are the user groups that are going to be migrated over. And of course, I want to move these users as well. All right. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and set up our instance so that we can get started on that migration. First, let me go into the administration and click on Manage Apps. Now, as you can see, my instance is already connected to the Atlassian Marketplace. So from here, I'm just going to search for Jira Cloud Migration Assistant. And here it is. This is the plugin that you need to add. Now, of course, in this case, it's already pre-installed, but if it wasn't, you'd have an install button on the right side over here. So all you needed to do is to click on that. And then, of course, the migration is going to be installed. Now, once that is done, all you need to do is move over to our system configuration. And you can also access this page by clicking on the gear icon and going into System. And from here, let's go ahead and scroll down until where it says Import and Export. And the last option over here is Migrate to Cloud, which is an option that was added as we installed the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant. Now, if we were going to do a site import, we would go into the backup system option instead. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click on Migrate to Cloud. Now, I already have a migration running, but let's go ahead and ignore that. If you didn't have, of course, have a migration running, if you didn't already have a migration running, you'd be directed straight to the Migration Assistant home. And this is just a simple dashboard that gives you a little bit of information about your product. So how many user groups you have, how many users, how many projects and issues, how much data for all of your attachments, and of course, how many apps are installed. Now, the first step over here, of course, is to assess our apps. So let's click on that. And this page is only essentially going to bring up all the plugins that are installed in our instance. In this case, I have Script Runner and EasyBI installed. And from here, you can actually work on this assessment for your apps beforehand, before you actually plan on starting the migration itself. So this could actually be a resource to help you get organized and prepare for the migration. Now, for each of the apps that are installed, you can see whether they exist in cloud. In this case, they both do. And you can also see whether they can be migrated. Now, in this case, not exactly. You have some automated paths or some recommended paths. And of course, if you click on any of those links, that's going to direct you to essentially documentation from the manufacturer of those apps, essentially identifying you what is going to be the recommended strategy to migrate those apps. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and say that for EasyBI, I'm going to go ahead and use an alternative. And for Script Runner, for now at least, I'm going to say that it is indeed needed in cloud. Once I'm done with all of that, and of course, I could enter notes over here if I want to trace perhaps like the reasons that led me to this choice. But in this case, I'm just going to leave these fields empty. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. And now this is asking me, okay, so like you chose to use an alternative for EasyBI. So what is that alternative? Let's say that I want to go ahead and use rich filters for Jira dashboards. Okay, for some reason when I type, it's not bringing it up. But anyways, there you go. So let's say that I want to use rich filters for Jira dashboards, right? And this information is coming directly from the Atlassian Marketplace. So you can just start typing away the name of the apps, or you can look for that in the Atlassian Marketplace, and you can locate the correct name that way, of course. But once you locate it in this drop-down, you can just click on that, select it, and as you can see, the Done button was just highlighted so that it's available for me now. So let's just click on Done, and that is pretty much it for the assessment of my apps. But now I need to prepare them. And before I can actually do anything to prepare my apps, I need to first connect to my cloud site. Now, if you don't have a cloud site already up and running, you can just click on Get Your Cloud Trial. And that's going to direct you to the page where you can claim a free trial of an Atlassian of a Jira Cloud site, which you can then use to migrate your data on like a test run or something like that. But in this case, I already have a site that I'm going to be migrating to. It's not this one actually, so let me go ahead and click on Choose Cloud Site. Continue. Remember that you need to be a site administrator, so you do need some permissions over there. Now, in this case, I'm just coming in from my local host over here. So, of course, you would need to enter the base URL for your server, and that's pretty much, like the base path that you need to type in to go into your Jira server instance. I'm just add the HTTP / over here. All right. And now, when I click on Migrate to, this is going to bring up all of the sites that I have available to me. Now, in this case, I'm going to be using the migration-demo.atlassian.net. But of course, once you set up your Jira Cloud site, it's going to show up in this dropdown. Make sure that you allow Atlassian to access migrations data so you can move your data accordingly, and click on Confirm. Okay, that's going to take me back here. And now, as you can see, that site is available on my dropdown, and it is indeed already selected. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Continue. And essentially now what it did is JCMA, or the Jira Cloud Migration System, looked into the site that I selected, the cloud site that I selected, and tried to identify which plugins that I set as required, or alternatives that I selected were already installed. In this case, neither were already installed, so I can just go ahead and click on Install App, and that's going to direct me to the cloud site, into the Atlassian Marketplace, so I can just go ahead and install those plugins. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click to start a free trial of Script Runner. All right, just takes a little minute. And in the meantime, let me go ahead and install the other one as well. Of course, this other one is Rich Filters for Jira Dashboards. So once again, I'll click on Start Free Trial. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like Script Runner has been added. And this one is just installing now. Okay, and it looks like Rich Filters was already also added to my site. All right, so with that, let's go back. And as you can see, it already identified that both plugins were installed in Cloud. So let me go ahead and click on Continue. Now, of course, for some plugins, you need to agree to third-party automated app data migration, which is the case for Script Runner. In this case, I have already done it previously, but essentially, you would just have a button over here to read all of those policy details, and then, of course, you could agree. You can revoke it afterwards if you decide to, but in this case, I'm just going to leave it as is and click on Done. And that's all there is to preparing our apps, essentially. And now it's time to actually go ahead and click on Migrate Your Data. What this is going to do now is it's going to allow us to create a new migration, right? So you can perform multiple migrations, and you can keep track of essentially like all of the steps and all the trials that you've done in the past, so you can essentially keep a library of migrations if you so desire, right? So first, let's go ahead and click on Connect to Cloud, and I'll enter a name for the migration. Now, in this case, I'm just going to call it Webinar Migration. Okay, the name is available to use, and I'll choose the cloud site that I selected previously. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and click on Choose Migration Method. Now, as I mentioned previously, of course, there is a beta to migrate advanced roadmaps plans. However, I'm not going to be migrating any plans at the moment, so I'll just go ahead and skip. All right. And now it's going to ask me for which projects I want to migrate. So let's go ahead and click on Select. I'll select them all, Add to Migration, and there you go. 3 projects, 45 issues, and 25K kilobytes of attachments have already been selected to migration. And now it's going to ask me what I want to do regarding my users and groups. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and set to migrate all users and groups from the Jira directory. as you know, I'm migrating all of the projects in the instance. But of course, if you were migrating just a select list of projects, you could select only users and groups related to the selected projects. However, keep in mind that this does take a while longer to finish all of the checks that are going to be necessary before the actual migration happens. Because this means that JCMA is going to have to analyze every issue in every project that you select and locate all of the users that are associated to those issues somehow, and then add them to your migration. So, there is an impact into how long the whole migration process is going to take if you select this upper option over here. So in this case, I'm just going to keep all users and groups. And then regarding group membership, you could either choose to migrate them separately, which means you're going to be migrating your users and then your groups, but they're not going to be associated automatically. This could be useful if you want to avoid perhaps granting specific permissions in cloud to users that might not need to have them or that shouldn't have them. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and set to preserve group membership. Let me go ahead and add that to migration. And finally, apps. Let me click select. And then it's going to set to either I could move no apps or all of the ones that I marked as needed in the migration path. So this is the option that I'm going to select. So let's apply those changes. And now we can check for errors. As you can see, we do have an error over here. And this is actually a migration breaking error. Some users, multiple users, do have the same email address in my instance. So that is something that I need to correct. Fortunately, however, the migration assistant actually identifies which users and which email addresses are being duplicated. As you can see, peter@mail.com and bruce@mail.com are associated to 2 users each. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this link. And then, of course, that's going to direct me to my user administration page where I can view which users specifically have the duplicated emails. So what I need to do here is I need to make sure that their emails are not duplicated, right? Like I said previously, of course, each user in cloud is going to need to use an Atlassian account. And of course, each Atlassian account is going to be associated to an email address. And you can't have multiple Atlassian accounts associated to the same email address. So that is why this could be a migration breaking error. So in this case, let me go ahead and edit this. I'll just add one over here to differentiate those two. Okay. And now if I go back here, let me edit my Bruce's as well. And once again, I'll add the one. Now, of course, if your users are being managed externally, not directly from the Jira user directory, then you would need to go into that external directory and apply those changes over there. And of course, synchronize the user directory and Jira afterwards. But that shouldn't be too much trouble, of course. Let me go ahead and refresh that. All right, as you can see, that now is all good. I have the green check mark, which means that there are no problems over here. But as you can see, I also have a warning message. Now, this may not be an error that is going to break my migration, but it's something that I need to keep in mind. In this case, some apps marked as needed in cloud have unknown or low migration success rates. And that, of course, is the case for Script Runner. Like I said previously, the way that Script Runner works in server versus in cloud is very different. So in this case, there's a low migration success rate. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that app from this migration. But that's only because I see that, perhaps I can just apply those changes after I migrate into cloud. Otherwise, of course, you could identify either an alternative or try to proceed with the migration regardless. As you can see, I'm filled with green check marks. So let's go ahead and review the migration. No warnings or errors. It's giving me an estimated time to migrate, right? And if all is set and ready, I can just go ahead and click on run. Now, of course, here is the migration that we just started. As you can see, it's currently running. It's saying that the migration is in progress, and I can view the details by clicking on View Details. And this way I can see at which step of the migration the JCMA is working on. So as you can see, it's going to first work with groups and users, and then after that, it's going to actually migrate my projects, right? So of course, that's going to take a little while. But besides that, I could also review any logs and reports, and those, of course, are going to be made available as the migration proceeds. So the pre-migration report, for example, is essentially an analysis of the whole pre-migration steps that we just did. You can download it and review it afterwards if you want. All right, so as you can see, my groups and users have already been migrated, so it's ready, and as a matter of fact, just started running the migration on those projects. So just to make sure that those users and groups have indeed been migrated over to cloud, let me jump back into my cloud instance and once again go into user management. All right, and as you can see, all of my users have already been migrated. And if I go over to groups, you can see that my DC user group and Marvel have both been migrated as well. So I have 10 users under the Marvel group and 4 users under the DC group. And I checked that before the migration and I can verify that this is indeed correct. So it's actually asking me to review those groups. Let me review it now. I'll approve. Okay, and I'll approve this one as well. All right. Okay, so let's go back, and as you can see, the project data has already been migrated, and now it's ready to start working on the attachments for those projects. So that means if I go back to my cloud instance and refresh this page, actually, let me go into the View Projects page. As you can see, my projects Hatch, Pickup, and Sedan are already available over here. If I open one of those projects, you can see that my issues have been migrated, the association to my users have been migrated, and any further configurations, such as my board, for example, have also been migrated. And now the attachments have been migrated. Let me double check on that as well. I know for a fact that this issue has an image attached to it, so let me open that. And here is my attachment. Perfect. So with that, everything has been migrated. If I go back, you can see that the migration has been completed. The status is set as complete, and this migration was indeed a success. And really, that's pretty much all there is to migrating your issues using JCMA. And any other migration assistants are pretty much going to work the same way as well. Now, I just have a couple of final tips for you regarding your migration. And of course, this demonstration was executed on a simple instance and with not a whole lot of data. So your environment is certainly going to be quite different and much more complex than this one was. So please feel free to reach out to Atlassian support. You can open a move ticket with them and they should be able to help you with your migration process, from pre-migration checks all the way to post-migration validations. Besides that, you can also get help from an Atlassian solution partner, and that's where we come in. Here at eCore, we have Atlassian certified consultants who have helped with many successful implementations and migrations in the past in all kinds of small and large organizations. We can help you plan out your migration, run the pre-migration checks, and even execute your migration for you. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. I do hope that this presentation was helpful and valuable for you. And please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to further discuss how we can help you with your migration. Now with that, I will pass you along now to our team here at eCore, who are ready to answer all of your questions. And once again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay, perfect. I was keeping an eye on the Q&A portion and I don't seem to see any questions. Now, before our webinar started, we did have two questions that were submitted that had to do with kind of our topic that we were going to go over. So we saw it fit to kind of hold it to the very end and share those questions and answers with you. The first being, what's the difference between running a migration myself and running it with a partner?
Thank you, Lynette. I'll take that. So you can do the migration yourself by using the information at Atlassian support site. And that is some of the links that Peter showed in his demo. There's a migration resources site, which has all the steps. And then it has that Jira pre-migration checklist. Then if you run into any problems, you can reach out to Atlassian support or go to the Atlassian community, ask a question, search to see what kind of problems other people have had out there in the community. However, if you use a partner, such as eCore, you have the expertise of an organization that has done successful migrations in the past, and several of those, large ones, small ones, simple ones, complex ones. And a partner would have experience with different apps, such as Script Runner, as Peter mentioned, and know from experience how to change those scripts through the cloud, as well as what kind of alternatives are out there for any apps that aren't available in the cloud. A partner would have experience writing custom APIs because sometimes data from those apps don't have migration tools yet. So a custom API has to be built for that. A partner would be aware of common challenges, pitfalls, and have worked through them already. And then finally, a partner can tap into a consolidated team, different consultants that have strengths in different skill sets and technical knowledge. So by using a partner overall, you would most likely reduce the amount of time needed to complete your migration.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Allison. And the second one, kind of wrapping things up since we are coming to the end of our time. The question is, how do I know in advance I'll need to upgrade my license before migrating?
Okay. So because we recommend using Jira Cloud Migration Assistant and Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant, there is a version that's required in order to use those tools. So for the Jira Migration Assistant, you have to be at version 7.6 or above. And for Confluence, you need to be a server or data center instance, a version 5.10 or above. So knowing that, you can determine what version you have. A system admin will go into your instance of Jira Confluence, go to system info, and then look and see what your current version of Jira and Confluence is. So although I've just said that you have to be on 7.6 for Jira and 5.10 for Confluence in order to use those tools, we still recommend going to the latest long-term support release, because then there's fewer problems with the data. So even though you look and go, yeah, I'm on 7.6, I'm fine, we still would recommend going to the latest long-term support release and upgrading to that. And that's out there on the Atlassian site. It'll tell you what the latest release is. Right now, it is 8.20 for Jira and 7.13 for Confluence. So that's it. I'm all set, Lynette.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Alrighty, well, that kind of wraps up the end of our webinar. I did want to just do some last minute reminders. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, this is recorded and it will be sent out to all registered and attendees. Now, I did want to invite you all to this year's Atlassian Team 22. eCore will have a booth there, and if you folks will be attending, feel free to reach out either to myself or maybe one of your account representatives who can assist with booking some time to chat with us, maybe learn a little bit more. So we hope to see you at this year's conference at our booth. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or anybody else at the team. My email is here at the bottom, Lynette.Curio@ecore.com. So thank you very much again for assisting our webinar today. Have a great day.